So the first thing we want to do here tonight is talk a little bit about adolescent development. And I know some of this is going to be a reminder to you guys, but it's a really nice sort of contextual framework to start looking at the various uses and potential abuses of the internet in reference to kids. So bear with me for a little bit while I just kind of run through an overview. So adolescence, it starts, we think, as sort of the onset of puberty, and it ends with the assumption of adult roles. We used to say, okay, 18, they're adults. We now know that due to brain changes and even how society treats kids, that they don't reach adult roles until usually later on in life, at least early 20s or so, maybe even longer, depending on the child. When we think about adolescence, we think about change. It's this huge time of change, both socially, physically, cognitively. There's even different stages along this journey. So we have early adolescence, middle, and late. And there's going to be different interventions that are going to make sense at different times based on where they are in that trajectory. So social development, we know this is huge, right? Your kids start wanting to spend more and more time with other peers. They start really valuing peer input. With that becomes a time where they're separating a little bit more from the nuclear family. It's one of their jobs, in fact, to test authority during this time, even your authority, and to challenge it a little bit to try to figure out who they are. With that comes identity formation. They're questioning, again, who am I going to be when I'm an adult? What makes me different in this family system? And who am I going to be when I leave? Along the lines of figuring out their identity, they're interested in sexuality, what they're attracted to, who's attracted to them, what they're looking for in relationships. And at the time of all this changes, they have increased responsibility, whether that's driving, whether that's making choices about the copious amounts of homework they have, and some increased autonomy as well. So thinking for an adolescent is a very exciting time, because for the first time they're able to abstract, so their thinking becomes a lot more complicated. They can take perspectives on things, they can think about thinking, and it's a lot more of a nuanced kind of picture, specifically towards later adolescence. So at the same time, when they have this newfound wisdom, and they'll let you know they have this newfound wisdom too, they have kind of a more intensive affective experience as well. Some of this is hormonal related, and some of it is actually brain changes itself. So the areas of the brain that are trying to deal with this kind of emotion-laden experience are in developmental phase. And sometimes their ability to feel it outpaces their ability to regulate it. And that can be an important point when we're thinking about how adolescents process information. Because I don't know if you've had this experience, but sometimes you can think, wow, my kid really is thinking through things really well, and they seem to be making sense. And other times you can have the experience, well, why in the world did they make that choice in that moment? That doesn't make any sense. And there could be a variety of reasons why this goes on, but this is one of them. Sometimes the affective experience sort of overwhelms their cognitive abilities to process. And this is one of the reasons that sort of talking ahead of time, pre-teaching, helping your adolescent think through things can be so important. Because if they have that process already, then when they get to more of an emotionally laden experience, they're able to sometimes reference that material better. Adolescents do have sort of a sense of invulnerability at times, maybe hormonally related again. We know certain hormones increase risk-taking behaviors. Maybe again, it's sort of this lack of perspective that sometimes develops later on through experience. But they can sort of not fully understand the negative consequences, or even if they do, the realization is, well, that's not going to happen to me. Physical development, I'm not going to go too much into this, but obviously it's a time where physically they're changing a lot. Physical appearance is very important. It can kind of go a little bit along with the identity formation where, in general, their identity, they're fitting in with a group. Really there's an importance to that, and along with that, their physical appearance can be a part of that picture. So internet and identity, a couple of pieces of just general information about this idea. First of all, online patterns of behavior are very similar to offline patterns of behavior. And this can be very reassuring in a way. So if you have a child who has a very good social network, is making good choices, is demonstrating in other areas of their life that they have a fairly good set of judgment overall, then likely that's reflected in their online choices as well. However, if you have a child that for whatever reason is struggling more with their self-confidence, boundaries, maybe a little bit more risk-taking behavior, offline, then I think you should probably be a little bit more concerned with their online choices. The other interesting thing, if you look at studies, is that we talked about the importance of exploring sexuality in this period, of understanding that issue, and this plays out a little bit more online than maybe other things. So this is a venue where, either through chatting or sexting or IMing or video camming, where kids can be playing more with this idea of sexuality, and there are potential risks associated with that. But there are potential also safe ways that kids sometimes choose to explore these topics on an online format. For younger adolescents, their thinking is still a little bit more concrete. They're still much more in the phase of having these affective, emotional experiences and not having as much perspective about how to interpret them. So this is a time where talking to them about your value system, what you think is important, setting out some rules in a more concrete way, and just kind of monitoring and supporting them in an active fashion might be the best approach. As they get older, and hopefully their thinking is progressing in a more nuanced way, they're learning more about how to manage different situations. This is a time where you want to give them more autonomy, have more natural consequences, and have a more collaborative problem-solving approach. The one corollary I have with this is that every child and every family is different, and there are going to be times where, even later on in adolescence, where you have to step in and take a much more active approach depending on the situation and your child. We think that safety is related to good decision-making skills and really supporting your teenager through this process. One of the things that we're not going to talk that much about, just because the data supports this is a sort of a lower risk thing, despite the media attention, is this issue of pedophiles that are somehow trying to prey on our kids online. Not to take away from how horrible that is if it happens, but when you look at the statistics, 1% of all arrests for sex crimes against children pertain to pedophiles. In addition, when you further look at it, oftentimes these individuals have disclosed their age ahead of time, and it comes down again to kids making wise choices about whether to pursue meeting up with these people or not. So I'm not saying this never happens and not to be concerned, but we're going to be focusing on some of the stuff that affects a broader range of children.